program that was formed to allow local businesses to aggregate into larger buying groups, enabling them to lower their energy costs by taking advantage of bulk energy purchase prices. I'm Lindsay Jameson, Director with Alberio Energy, the official operator of District Buying Power, and I'll be the moderator for today. We were invited here today by two wonderful government-run groups, the DOEE and the DSLBD. Quite the mouthful of letters there, which are the Department of Energy and Environment and the Department of Small and Local Business Development. We have some great guests with us today that will give some valuable information about the partnership of the district buying power with DC, some information on how businesses and commercial property owners can save money, where the energy markets are today post-pandemic, some new benchmarking rules coming out in DC, and we'll also discuss green energy. We'll leave some time at the end for those questions from our live audience, so you can go ahead and send questions in through the chat feature, and at the end, we'll run through as many as we can. So let's get started with an introduction of our guests. Then we'll head into the panel discussion. So we have Lolita Perry with us. She is the Energy Program Specialist in the Data and Benchmarking Division of the DOEE. Lolita is a project manager and contract administrator overseeing the day-to-day operations of various energy programs. She makes sure programs are in compliance with updated policies and meeting contractual obligations to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse of government funds. Not only will Lolita be talking about energy today, but you'll notice she brings high energy to the table. We have Kate Mariand, the Program Manager for the Innovation and Equitable Development Division of the Department of Small and Local Business Development. Kate runs a team that supports removing barriers for small business, including grants, technical assistance, and support with financing. And lastly, we have Matt Wheatley, an executive with Alberio Energy, the official operator of District Buying Power, and he is focusing his efforts on spreading the word on how businesses in DC can save money and also letting them know about the free benchmarking offer that District Buying Power has for enrolled businesses. So thank you everyone for coming today. I really appreciate it. And let's get started. So Lolita, I didn't see you on my screen there, but we'll start with you by talking to you. At the DOEE, you've been helping tremendously with getting district buying power moving. Can you talk a bit about the formation of district buying power, when it happened, and why there was a need for the program?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you all today to talk about the district buying power. It has been a long time coming for the District Department of Energy and Environment. The legislation from the Retail Electric Competition Consumer Protection Act it happened in 1999, and we started our first aggregation program around about 2011, but it only included the mayor's accounts, the DC Convention Center at the time, the University of the District of Columbia, and DDOTs with their lights. We also included the Council of Government and PG County. That ran for about 9 years with just those accounts. Now, DGS has taken up the helm and they're still doing the mayor's accounts, but outside of those, we didn't have a municipal aggregation program happening. The residential accounts were left out and a lot of our small businesses were left out. And the whole idea behind aggregation is bringing a group of people or a load together to reduce the price. I like to look at it this way. If you go to the CVS and you buy a roll of toilet paper, you may pay $3.50 for it. But if you go to Costco and you buy a larger portion, the price tends to be cheaper per roll. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to group businesses together, get that load, present it to the utility company and say, hey, we have this large group. Can you give us a cheap price for them? So that's what we want to do. And coming right off of a pandemic, well, I'm not sure if we're off of it, if we're still in it, but being in the midst of a pandemic and our businesses being hit the way that they are, I'm sure you could raise your hand and say you could benefit from having to pay a lesser utility bill. And so we put out a contract or a solicitation a couple of years ago. And I want to say we've been working on it for 4 years for you all. And now seems to be the optimal time where it all came together, and it's definitely needed. And Alberio, our contractor, they won the solicitation, which means they had the best proposal out there, and we selected the best proposal for you because that's what I do. I want to make sure that we do the best of the best. I want to make sure I frame this and let you know this is a district government program. Alberio is the contractor. They are they operate as a broker. The DC government does not operate as a broker, so we needed someone to operate as a middleman for us to go for the utility company, and they are going to make sure that they secure the best price for you. So that's how it happened. We have the legislation on the books that says that we can do this, and now we are operating in it, and Alberio is here to run this program for us. So if you have any questions or anything comes up, you'll have my contact information here. Please reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions, cares, or concern after you enroll, okay? All right.
Thank you so much, Lolita. I appreciate that. So Matt, working with the DOEE and DC has been really great. With Alberio Energy being chosen to run this district buying power program, could you give a brief pitch about what it does, maybe explain what an energy aggregation is a bit more, and what buying power might mean, especially for these DC businesses?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. You're right, it has been a great process, and Lolita is always a high energy actor to follow, so thank you for that warm welcome. In terms of Alberio, what we do is we are a smart energy company. So we are licensed and regulated in every state and district that we operate in. And what we do with this program is very similar to programs we've done elsewhere. So we've ran a program for the city of Boston, for the city of Philadelphia, for Dunkin' Donuts, for their franchise locations, and for many other kind of private and other area aggregations. And what we really do is three things together. So the first is we use our energy experts and proprietary software, which includes ways of having the whole energy market compete in a reverse auction for the ability to serve an aggregation and really drive that price down. We used to use that energy software to help customers understand in single sign-on mode and real time what's happening with the energy, help them have alerts and budgets and insights into their energy to keep that portion of their spend under control. And then lastly, we can use our software to help buildings that have to do benchmarking or reporting to Energy Star requirements to do that. So it sounds like a lot of different things, but put simply, district buying power has been created to ensure that small and medium businesses across the district, as well as governmental and charitable organizations who have got core business and core missions to get on with in quite a difficult context and quite a distracting time, have got something that they can lean on to help them through this process and save some all important dollars.
Thanks, Matt. That's really great. And so, Kate, I'm going to bring you back in. Your work with the DSLBD must have had quite the shakeup during the pandemic, with many of these local businesses shuttering for safety. With many of the local businesses now moving back into their offices, stores are opening up. Can you explain a bit about the summer outlook and beyond?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of the business owners that are on the line today, I mean, this even better than we do. At all times, every dollar counts. But at this time, as we move into recovery, many businesses have existing debt that you are trying to work through. Some of that may be past rent, some of that may be past mortgages, some of that may just be bills because some of your business was down. And so one of the things that we always talk about in access to capital, sometimes capital is getting new money into your business, but a lot of times it's not spending money you don't have to spend. And so it's one of the reasons we're so excited about this program and this opportunity that businesses of any size are able to lower their energy costs and keep more of that money in your business. We know that recovery is going to be difficult for some businesses. It does look like a lot of the federal funds that had been available earlier are not coming through in the same ways. And so as people are looking at their recovery budgets, looking to make additional dollars and put those in so that you can stay afloat is going to be incredibly important. We know that it's a hard time right now.
It is, Kate, and thank you so much. And so with energy, it is a top 5 expense for many businesses. So Matt, can you talk a little bit about district buying power, how that could help them with that?
Sure, and I want to pick up on that top 5 comment because it's interesting. A couple of statistics or insights for folks. So one would be that according to a recent report by the Carbon Trust, a 20% cut in energy costs can represent as much as of an equivalence of a 5% increase in revenue for a business. Now, all of us that run organizations and businesses know just how much effort and time it takes to get a 5% revenue increase. So to think that there might be an equivalent, juice for the squeeze here in the energy cost is quite surprising, but not to everyone. If I think about another statistic to share with people, there is a great institution based out of DC called the NFIB. They actually estimate that not just the top 5, they think that for 1 in 3 businesses, small businesses, energy is a top 3 expense. Now, often that is often thought about as fuels, like running fleets, running trucks, but actually a third of small businesses, that biggest energy cost is heating and cooling. So in terms of, is this an important element? Absolutely. But I think in my experience of 10, nearly 20 years working with different businesses would be, businesses often think about, and organizations too, as energy as if it's a tax. And all of us think about taxes as one of those certainties in life that you can't control it. You hand it to your tax accountant and let them file, but it is what it is. And often people think about this like an unmanageable category. But the good news is it's not unmanageable, and there's absolutely opportunities in there. And I'm going to start to add some color onto that. So yes, I totally agree with your aspect that this is a top line of importance, but often underlooked because it's often seen as complex or immovable. So let's set some context. I want to pick up with something that Kate said, which was fascinating about around the impact of the pandemic, and something that Lolita said is, are we in it or are we not? All of us who love the district understand that it's been a challenging 14 months. We went into lockdown orders in May last year. We've just come out of those for corporates in May this year, with some of the restrictions on events and restaurants coming off in June, and the government opened itself in July. So we've come through this period of time where, believe it or not, 6 out of 10 workers in DC were not working in the district during that time. They were either working from home or outside of the district. That's a lot of empty stores, empty restaurants, and small businesses that really had to change the way we work. And so hopefully, as Lolita said, we're coming through that. What that meant for the last year or so is we certainly saw from an energy context, prices coming down through demand and the market's not feeling good. And we've seen the opposite since then. So let me provide a bit of context of what I mean by that and why this is top of mind. I think in terms of, all of us who have worked with contractors recently, my contractors keep telling me the price of lumber has never been higher, and we've all read in the papers other costs going up. Energy has not been immune to that. So to give you a couple of ideas, if I think about natural gas, just a basic commodity, in May 2019, before the pandemic, that unit of gas was about $2.60. In May 2020, at the very early stages of the pandemic, that same unit went all the way down to $1.80. Or now in May 2021, it went all the way back up to $2.90. So in other words, we've not only seen a cost of, the cost of goods recover to what they were pre-pandemic, but they're now 14% higher May on May, which drives the cost of electric and other needs for natural gas. Not only that, rolling forward to June, according to the EIA, the June gas prices are the highest we've seen in the US since 2014. So you've got this kind of post-pandemic reaction from businesses to say, I need to get my business open, I can finally get it open, but costs are really accelerating in many areas. And utilities, as I say, aren't immune to that. And businesses on this call and organizations on this call has probably noticed a couple of things, which I'll touch on very briefly. One is that just last month, Pepco DC, which is the regulated utility responsible for delivering the power to your property and maintaining those wires and meters, they've had a multi-year rate approval to increase the costs in the district by $108 million over 3 years, that all of us as home ratepayers and business ratepayers will be paying on the delivery side of it. And on the supply side of the equation, which is where this program can help, and that makes up about 2/3 of the bill, those costs have been going up as well. So if I think about a business that isn't using a competitive supplier and is taking power from Pepco DC's default rate, those rates through May 31, 2022 have gone up about 7.5% for most businesses on those medium kind of tariffs. So they're paying somewhere between kind of 7.4 and 7.7 cents per kWh. So having a pandemic when all of us are trying to reopen our businesses, but having our delivery costs go up in high percentages, our supply costs going up in high percentages, and actually their outlook for energy continuing to go up is a challenge. So what's driving that? Absolutely, it's economic conditions, it's market kind of speculation, as well as kind of fundamental changes around it. And before I come back to you, Lindsay, and explain how the DC program here, District Buying Power, is a very well timed one. Just two more contexts to add. So one would be weather. All of us who love spending time in DC understand in the summer we can't get away from the mugginess. It is just part of our weather pattern. What's interesting is a lot of energy generators and energy suppliers and market participants look at what they think of as a 30-year normal. And what they mean by that is they simply look at average temperatures for that long period of time. Recently, the data set for the newest 30-year set, which is 1991 through 2020, came out. Why am I mentioning this? Well, it's because June, July, and August in the DC area is now 1 degree hotter on average for those 3 months than it was in the old data set. And so this is looking at people thinking there's going to be more demand for electric, for cooling and other items. And all of us that have spent a lot of time in the district in the summer know that feels right, not least because 7 of the 8 hottest ever summers in DC have happened in the last 10 years. So you've got this kind of local, regional, as well as national weather trend where it is getting more pronounced in the summer, as well as more pronounced in the winter, as Texas experienced in February. So what does that mean? Well, it means we're just seeing a higher demand for natural gas in the winter for heating and electric for heating, and then higher demand for electric for cooling and space conditioning that is on an upward trend. The second thing we're seeing, which is fantastic, is DC is one of about 90 cities in the US, but definitely the largest and definitely the leading, that is trying to push the grid to be greener, which is great for all of us as residents to say cleaner air, less pollution, better cost. But that does mean in the short term there's a push to do that. So the percentage of energy that must come from those cleaner sources and away from natural gas and these other elements is going up. So the old regulations said that the grid had to get 50% green by 2032. And new regulations are actually going to get the grid to go 100%. So I think all of this in context, we're seeing 4 things. We're seeing businesses have to react to all of the ever-changing aspects, but the economic outlook is now finally a positive thing. The second thing in context is all costs are going up, including energy, and utilities are a key aspect of that. And we're seeing that the demand for energy is going to continue to go up because of weather and other reasons, which means that for the fourth point would be there are new programs created in that context to help. So to bring it right back to your original question, Lindsay, and thank you for letting me spend a few minutes providing that context and a few statistics and insights, is we can help businesses through that. And so if we step it back to what I said earlier, is to say, we can gather up all those independent locations, whether it's a charity or a church or a multifamily or a business who are eligible for this program, and bring them together. And how it works with an aggregation is we can say for all of these businesses, for their energy needs in, say, for example, 2022, we can have 40 plus vetted energy generators as a supplier compete for that business, and everyone gets the same rate. So what that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean if the commercial property doesn't pay its bill that the church who's also in the program pays it, or they have the same contract. They don't. It's purely a price mechanism. Say everyone in this group gets the same price, or that supplier cannot win it. And it's a great competitive mechanism to give everyone a price that's near a wholesale rather than retail, and make sure we're looking at it. The second thing we do, we have energy experts that love these details dearly. I'm one of them, or I'm one of 1,000 people at Alberia that runs these programs, to really keep those contracts under control and to make sure that anything that needs to be changed on behalf of those buildings happen, whether it's an account update, a meter update, a billing query, that is under control. And then lastly, we can use these energy programs we have, like software programs, just to make sure that customers, for example, someone who might be managing 10 properties, can see in one single sign-on what's really happening. PDF copies of my utilities, some graphs and some insights. And if they choose to use the service, and this is fully subsidized by the DC government, they can actually use that software to submit their data to Energy Star, which is going to be a legal requirement for many, many businesses, increasingly between this year and 2024. And it'll be done for free as part of the service, thanks to the kind and appreciated subsidy that's been given by DC. So a lot there to take in, but I think the timing is right for businesses to really look at, are my energy costs under control? And at that same time, the DC government has created this program to not only help them control the cost, but also stay on top of their reporting requirements, which are going to be increasing. Right. Lindsay, thank you. I took probably a few more minutes than you intended, but wanted to share some important context to the folks on the call.
No, that's okay. We appreciate it so much. They were definitely a lot of great data points and a lot of statistics that are really helpful and eye-opening in the energy industry. So a couple more questions just to throw back at you. You mentioned these benchmarking requirements and this submitting your data through the Energy Star portal. And so could you talk a little bit more about benchmarking? There's some new rules in DC for benchmarking, particularly around square footage requirements. And
Sure.
these will affect more DC buildings and businesses. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think most of the folks on this call are probably familiar with the Energy Star logo. I've got another monitor just to the left of me, and it has the logo on it when the screensaver kicks in. But most of us don't necessarily think about it too often. It's a federal platform that is used to kind of gather up energy data for anyone that has to report. I used an analogy earlier on about energy sometimes felt like tax, and it does. So I think about Energy Star and benchmarking as being the annual filing about how much energy a building uses, similar to an annual tax form about how much revenue and how much cost that business has. And there are many cities that used to say that it was optional if businesses or buildings wanted to use Energy Star to gather up information. Very large buildings were often mandated as part of this trend to say, look, we not only have we got to look after the rate, but we've slowly got to help businesses and buildings reduce their energy. The only way we can do that is to make sure that appropriate government bodies have visibility into this. So what is Energy Star? Energy Star is an online platform where you submit all of your energy benchmark. In terms of who has to submit that, that's very much changing. So it used to be those very largest buildings were mandated to fill in and populate all that data, that annual kind of energy tax assessment. And that used to be buildings that had a square footage of 50,000 square feet and above. Now, for buildings that are between 25 and 50,000 square feet, from 2022 onwards, they will also have to effectively submit these energy tax returns, the benchmarking as it's known. And that means it's relevant now, because a lot of businesses I spoke to have said to me, well, Matt, I don't have to do that until 2022. I have problems I'm looking at in my core business now. I'm not going to worry about it. But this is the period they're going to be reporting on. We are over halfway through the year that will be reported on for the first time. So what it means is that customers who have buildings that fall in with that range will have to gather up natural gas data, electric data, fuels data, water consumption, and make sure that it is added up for all of the impact of that building's footprint and submit it through the Energy Star portfolio submission process in the appropriate and accurate way and on time, so they can avoid penalties and fines if they don't. So what we're saying is customers that use our software will gather up all that data and we will help them through that process. So it's almost like using some of these great software packages you have for tax. Well, there's great software packages for this. That's not the last change that's coming. So I've talked about how it used to be buildings at more than 50,000 square feet. And now next year, for this year, it's going to be 25, 50. After that, it's actually stepping down again. So buildings that are between 10,000 square feet and 25,000 square feet are going to do their first submission in 2025 regarding their 2024 data. So thousands and thousands of more buildings between now and the next 3 years are going to have to be doing these benchmarking submissions for the first time. About a third up to a half of those are going to be doing their first submission next year for the energy they're using right today. Does that help, Lindsay, answer the question?
That does a lot. And it sounds like there's, I mean, these changes are big changes, but there is time, but it's also sounds like it's important to act now for 2022 data requirements.
That's right. And there are benefits. So the good news is if a restaurant falls into this square footage and they are legally obligated to do this benchmarking, if once they submit this, they get an energy score and it's out of 100, but if a business gets, or a building, I should say, gets an energy score that's 75 or more, that typically puts them in the top quartile of all efficient buildings. And the more energy efficient a building is, they can actually get a certificate. So, in the future, will consumers have a preference for, say, a restaurant or a store or a consumer good that is in an energy efficient building rather than less one? It's very possible. What I'd say is it certainly can't hurt. It's good to be seen to be more environmentally friendly and efficient. So there are benefits in terms of some of those positive certificates that come out. More importantly, speaking to folks that really care about a cost basis, is you can't manage what you don't measure. So this kind of forced discipline of having to submit these reports in, sure, it ends up getting there, but like all of us that have to do our tax returns for ourselves or our businesses, you can't help but make observations when you do that. Oh, I didn't realize that X or Y happened. We can help. So you're right. If businesses start preparing to be ready for that now, because we're live in that period, it can be very helpful. We're happy that this program exists and that we're allowed to help those organizations.
That's really great. Kate, I'm going to jump over to you and then I'm going to jump back to Matt to see how district buying power can help. But before we go there, Kate, these changes that are happening, do you believe that these small and local businesses that fall into this new 10,000 square foot requirement, are they ready for this?
So I'm not sure how many people have heard about this requirement coming forward. And I think there's another interesting space, and this may be actually a good question for some of the rest of our panel. If someone is a tenant with a smaller square footage, but they're a tenant in a building that is larger, they may still have a need to be able to give this information to their landlord, who is then required to report that. And it's such an interesting time for many tenants in commercial spaces in their conversations with their landlords. And so knowing things that you might need to be able to provide to your landlord gives you one more piece of conversation you might be having as you're having negotiations with your landlords in different ways. So I do think that there's a lot of need for people to learn about this. And I think that there are some interesting ways in which people can think about how this relates to the overall footprint that they have for their business. But I'd love to push that question back out if there's anyone else who knows a little bit more about how this will work for building owners who have multiple tenants. I assume that they are going to need to be able to report as well, but many of those tenants may actually be paying the electricity themselves.
Yeah. Well, and if we, I don't know if Lolita can jump in about that, but just in terms of just helping businesses in general with these benchmarking requirements, Matt, maybe you could talk about this. We mentioned earlier a benchmarking offer that District Buying Power has. Could you talk a little bit about that and how District Buying Power can help with that benchmarking requirement?
Sure. So for any organizations that are eligible and enroll their supply buying needs into district buying power to get that group rate, because of a subsidy and an arrangement with the DC government, they will then be eligible to have the benchmarking service and submission completed free of charge as part of that. So that's great. What it means is we'll take our software package and we'll integrate that with their utility accounts directly in data. Where customers aren't on e-billing or have online data, we will then hard scrape and get the data into the systems on their behalf manually, and then present to them the reports that are approved to go in. So it's a really good arrangement with the district to say, this evolving landscape that will be helpful to everyone. We want to make sure that businesses that need to do it can do so with the most minimal cost and distraction. And this is one way to do that.
That's great. Thanks so much, Matt.
Sure.
So with some of the benchmarking discussion out of the way, let's go green for a few minutes. So Matt, what are you hearing from market policy and customer perspective on green energy? And is that something that's important? And what does that cost?
It's a really good question. I remember many years ago when there was wind farms starting to be built quite aggressively in Texas, I was speaking to our local Texas representative, and I said, how do people in your district feel about green? And what he said to me is, if it's green that can be folded and put in a wallet, they're interested. Any other type of green, they are not. And that always stuck with me as one of those easy things to remember. And for the most part, I think that statement has remained true for 15 years. I think more and more we're being consumer-led now, where because the way that consumers are making choices about the products they choose to buy, as well as elected officials making community-driven decisions around what can be done. I think the whole views around that are changing. There's some great statistics recently from IBM about how much value consumers put on this, and there's a reason to do it, even absent the feel-good factor and the fact that it could be good for business from a marketing perspective, and there's a reason why many brands are doing this. The financials are different. It used to be a case that without a subsidy that was quite heavy from government, you would be paying a premium for green. Now what we're seeing is that with new assets coming on board and large players picking up the incentives directly, actually green can often be a discount to some of the market prevailing mixes, and that's without risking the reliability. The reliability aspects are kind of burdened on the generator for them to balance all of the requirements. The consumer gets the benefit of whatever overall mix comes out. So I think the landscape and the attitudes have certainly changed. And so I think this notion that if I want to go green, I have to pay a premium, given all the changes in legislations and a lot of the incentives and subsidies that those green generators can collect directly, has changed, which is a wonderful thing. And so I think it's good to have very different conversations now with some of the retail brands, some of the independent companies, some of the commercial properties that are almost now looking to compete on this. They'll see one building is LEED certified, they'll see another that is Energy Star, they'll have a sustainably backed product or a sustainable diamond that one of our customers creates. Having these new aspects is really interesting. The good news about this buying power process is that it makes that that choice very simple. So in Boston Buying Power, where there's around 3,000 plus commercials in the main aggregation, that's been from memory green powered for 6 years, but it was never mandatory at the beginning. We could say to customers, here is the secured rates, opt in and let us know whether you choose the green one or not. Given the last 4 years that brown power, as it's called, and green power have been the same, why wouldn't you choose it in terms of it's the lowest market rate and they're both available to the buying group? That's what you choose. So I think this is another kind of, let's call it hidden benefit, that if a company or organization has an ESG goal, either formally or informally, and having either kind of carbon offset or renewably supplied energy is important, well, district buying power can take care of that aspect of it too, which is fantastic.
That's really great. So district buying power sounds like a great resource for these DC businesses and the building owners. Can you talk a bit about who is eligible and how does a business go about enrolling?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So I get asked this a lot. So a single family kind of residential home is not eligible. There's many people probably in this call, myself included, would love to have a business rate for my domestic home. Unfortunately, that is not eligible. But many accounts that have a residential tariff, according to Pepco DC, are still eligible. So churches, community centers, universities that own or maintain those, or even multifamily buildings, those are absolutely eligible. The first key is the entity responsible for that Pepco bill? Is it a person or is it an entity? It could be a charitable, governmental, or a corporate entity. And then second of all, what is the nature of that building? So if it's someone who is working from a single family home in a room, unfortunately that's not eligible. But in many other instances they are. If in doubt though, that's what our enrollment team are for. So if customers aren't sure, what they can do is go onto the district buying power website. They can do the enrollment form and submit a copy of that Pepco bill. Our enrollment team will be able to check it behind the scenes for eligibility and let them know that yes, you are eligible for this, or no, you're not.
That's really great. You've given us some really great information. It was a great discussion. So we want to give our chance, kind of turn it over to the audience. There were a couple questions that did come in. Kate, I'm going to have her run through those questions if she can. And if you have any other questions, feel free to type them in that chat as we go through them. So let's turn over to audience Q&A.
Lindsay, thank you so much. And there are a couple questions. I think they have been answered, or at least one of them, the first one was answered. While we start these questions, though, I definitely encourage folks to drop any additional questions that you have in the chat. It doesn't look like we have any call-in users, so we'll just be able to work from the chat. I think you had just answered this, Matt, but we did get a question about home-based businesses. And so if the business isn't in the home, could you just reiterate what you said a moment ago?
Sure, happy to. So if the home is a single family domestic unit and it's a home-based entity in it, it's unlikely to be eligible because of the nature of that building. So that would be a no. If it's other types of businesses, providing it's an entity that is paying that Pepco bill and is the addressee on that Pepco bill, it is eligible. And if it's a university or a church or a community center that owns those single family domestic properties on campus, even those are eligible. So it's a slightly interesting area. You might have for example, a university that has main campuses and a couple of houses on it for staff and or even students. Those would be eligible. But someone who's in their single family home working out of a home office or a home bedroom, that wouldn't be. But if in doubt, what I'd say would be contact the enrollment team with a copy of the bill, and they'll look into it for you. I did see pop up on the chat as well another question about what the qualifications for small businesses. Providing it kind of hits those aspects that I just mentioned, any business type is available, and any charitable or a governmental organization is eligible. The other thing I'd point out as well, there are other benefits. So there are sales tax exemptions for certain industry types. There's something called OTR 308 that gets removes sales tax on utility bills for certain entities. So in terms of two birds with one stone, if a business like a restaurant says, I think I'm eligible for this program, and I think I might be eligible for tax exemption, having them submit their bills into the district buying power team to review those opportunities, makes a ton of sense.
Great. I'm going to go slightly out of order because there was one more home-based business question. Looking to see if someone can find that line. If it is I'm not sure what ADU is, but if it is ADU on property, so it's an apartment above a garage, and that space is only used for business, might that be eligible?
Yeah, I think that's something like additional domestic unit, if memory serves. Could be wrong, but I think this is where you convert a piece of the property into a dedicated space. It's going to come down to us reviewing the tariff and understanding if an corporate entity name is on that bill. So case by case basis, if in doubt, send those invoices over.
Okay. We have another question about the rate versus the Pepco rate. So the question is there a guarantee that the aggregation rate will beat the Pepco rate? What happens if the Pepco rate drops below the aggregation rate?
That's a great question. Yeah, let me pick that one up. So in terms of the Pepco rate, the default rates are set for about a year, about once a year. So as I mentioned in June just passed, we now know what that rate is going to be through May 2021. So when in batches we run these auctions, we already know what we're aiming at in terms of it. So if the market offered fixed rates, which come through the district buying power process, we're above that, we would obviously not get approval to lock in. We'd only get approval at a certain time. The interesting thing is, if there is a market opportunity where the market expects the cost to keep rising, and you might have an opportunity with enrollee permission to lock in for 2 years, there obviously can't be a guarantee. So we can't know because Pepco doesn't know, and therefore we don't know what that rate is going to be in the second year. But we only do it if it's a discount to the prevailing Pepco rate today, and all of the market data kind of told us yes, that's a 2-year deal. And again, that comes down to the approval process with the enrollees at that time. So, to summarize, we wouldn't ever lock in a rate if it was, above the either current or next Pepco rate that has been published. What we can't do is guarantee what will happen in the future, because in 12 to 14 to 18 months from now, Pepco might change that rate and you won't know what it looks like. What we can do though is, and a lot of businesses ask us this, our business, we have to, for all of our geographies, and North America is one of them, we have to budget, and I'm running through this process for my business right now, 2022 and 2023, making sure I've got a fixed rate so I know what my budget is going to be and manage that is very attractive, particularly with the uncertainties and the context I provided earlier.
Mm-hmm. If someone joins the energy aggregation and they then decide that they want to leave for any reason, how difficult is it for them to leave?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So the benefit of running a buying group is with any supplier that supplies it, we get, let's call it an allowance to add in new businesses after the fact to that pre-existing rate, as well as remove them without any penalties or tolerances. That said, outside of those tolerances, it is a contractual commitment for this business to say, yes, I'm going to be part of it. Now, this contract is fully assignable. So if the business sells a location or sublets or moves, the next occupier, whether it's a tenant or building owner, can absolutely step into that. So it's fully assignable, but it is a contract commitment that's very important. So if a business says, look, I'm just not so sure I'm going to survive for the next 12 months, it's probably not for them. If a business says, this is important to me and I need to manage this cost, it is a real contractual commitment they'll need to live by and make sure that they're serving such.
So I know we talked a bit about home-based businesses before. One question is, if your size is underneath the energy benchmarking requirements, can you still participate in district buying power and the energy aggregation?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's a bodega or a corner store or a tailor or a restaurant, many of these organizations have very real energy costs and material to them, but they're way below those square footage requirements. So absolutely, someone who is looking at the rate side of what they're paying for supply and says, I need a better mechanism to manage this, they're eligible, providing they have an entity name. Size when it comes to eligibility doesn't matter. Size only matters to the benchmarking aspect.
Can businesses choose the source of energy, such as solar panels, wind power, nuclear? And in addition to that, if someone has had solar installed to help reduce their energy costs, how would that interact with district buying power?
Yeah, these are really interesting. So can I reverse the order of that? So the question about solar panels is a great one. But customers continue to have the ability to put any generation on their site that they require. So if a business makes an investment in solar panels to reduce their load, that's fantastic, and doesn't change their eligibility to this, or it changes the amount of energy that they buy. In terms of how this structures, is this program sets the rate, so the cents per kWh that a customer has to pay. What it doesn't do is put any controls or limits in terms of how much power they use. So if a business makes that investment, they will need less power from the grid, because the good news is they're actually going to be generating some of their own needs themselves. What's ever left over will be the rate that district buying power secures for them. So that's a really important question. This doesn't preclude customers from making those great investment choices. In terms of the grid supply power, can they choose the specific source? At the moment, the answer is no. So what we will be able to do is look at and fix in one certain source. What we're not going to be able to do, because as I said, just in the Boston one alone, there's 3,000 commercials just in the main one alone. What we can't do is go around and have a sense of what everyone likes are. Someone wants upstate New York hydro, someone else wants Bangor wind, another person wants Texas solar. What we'll do is look at conformance with the district. So it will always be like the most local, most cheap renewable energy source. We think that will evolve over time. So as some of the regulations are changing and the technology is catching up, I actually could see in a very short period of time, every customer will be able to select exactly their sourcing and we'll be able to match it more in real time. At the moment, because we have to do it in blocks, the customer can choose renewable. They can't be too much more specific at this moment in time beyond that.
That's wonderful. Those are the extent of the questions that I'm currently seeing in the chat. I definitely want to invite folks, if you have a question that you haven't answered. I know we had a lot of questions about home-based businesses, and I know we've covered that a couple of different ways. So hopefully, if you did have a question about home-based businesses, that was answered. I do have one last question that I would like to ask, and it's sort of back on benchmarking. And you covered this, but maybe if you could say this quickly for smaller businesses that are under any of the requirements, what is a real practical use that they will have from the benchmarking information that they'll get from district buying power?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the software approach. And many small businesses see this. They've got a login for Pepco DC, they have a login for Washington Gas, they have logins for water and sewer, and they've got or they've got PDFs coming at them, or even postal invoices coming at them from many different ways. What this software does is bring that all into one place with a single sign-on. So any kind of user of the software, regardless of their size, and if they have to do benchmarking, can see three things. The first is electronic copies of their documents at any one time. And so many businesses find that helpful for their accountants, or their bookkeepers to say, well, here's PDF copies for my utilities. So that's one benefit. The second benefit is that businesses will see graphs and usage information in real time that's populated by that. So at a quick glance, I can see, is my usage up, or down, and I can see that versus expectations. So the software will say, based on the type of business you are and what the weather has been in June, you're either a little bit more or a little bit less. And so the system will start to say, hey, you look out of kilter here. Lastly, the system can generate warnings for the customer. And those warnings might include, hey, the utility has estimated your bill for the third month in a row. Look at that, have them come out and read your meter if it's a pedestrian meeting. The system might alert them to say, in this month, you're 25% over expected usage for water. Please contact the company or have a look. Or it might give them views in terms of opportunities to save. So even if someone doesn't have to take all that information and give it once a year to the government as a mandate, what they can do is use those things on a monthly basis inside their business to get very simple insights into what's happening. Many businesses might say, well, if I'm going to invest in new lighting, I upgrade my LED lighting, I'd like to be able to see in real time, like before and after, did my bill come down by the amount I thought it could be? So having utility data-based screens that can be seen on a tablet, a computer, a phone, just can be quite helpful. So what I'd say is it's a very good insight, tool that can give customers a sense of where the spend is going.
Wonderful. Lindsay, I want to start passing it back over to you, but maybe I'll tee up either for you or maybe for Lolita. Some folks have mentioned in the chat how informative this was, how much information was here. I know people are interested in doing some more research, both on this and on other energy, programs and incentives and information. And so if anyone, as we do wrap up, has other places to share, just be like, these are some great places to look. As you're doing additional research, I think people would definitely appreciate that as well. Lindsay, I'm going to pass it back to you.
I'd love to just pick up on that a couple things. Obviously, we've spoken about our program that we're running on behalf of the government quite a lot today, but there is actually other fantastic programs the DC government runs. So what I'd say to everyone on the call is, check out DCSEU. It's a fantastic site that's government endorsed. It shows where certain rebates and incentives can come for projects or efficiency grants that buildings might do. So if any registrants on this call are looking at upgrading windows or lights or heat furnaces or coolers or those kind of aspects, don't do it until you look at that website, because there could be some very material dollars waiting for you. That's one thing I'd say. The second thing is, it's a reminder, and a lot of people forget this, tax exemptions that entities have, either based on charitable status or entity type. Those same tax exemptions can sometimes be used on utility bills, and there are additional ones that are available. So very specifically, and we won't get into the details of this because it's complex, but certain activities as it relates to manufacturing and food production can actually get additional kind of tax removals off their utility bills. And again, our program can help with that, but your tax accountants can also help you with that if you don't choose not to use our program. But outside of us thinking this benchmarking aspect is really good, I'd say, DCSEU for rebates, incentives for activities, and tax exemptions for certain entities. I'd encourage everyone to look at.
Yeah, and while you were speaking, another question came in, so we can look at that one too. This is about the energy benchmarking requirements, and the question is, if you have two buildings with the same owner, and each of those buildings is 15,000 square feet, would it fall under the 30,000 square feet requirement for 22, or would they be considered separately and then make the submission year requirement 2025? So the buildings are individually 15,000 square feet, but the owner has more than one building.
I think I know the answer to this, and also have an observation, which it sounds like one of those. Do you remember those questions in high school? If you have two trains on the track and one is traveling at 75, it sounds like one of those questions, and I was always terrible at those because it was never relevant. Because energy is relevant to me, I get excited about this one. But the answer is it's done on a building basis. And so you think about these as two separate buildings, two separate filings. But the owner, if they're responsible for both of them, would be submitting them and clearing their obligations. So it's almost like when you have multiple, tax returns.
Wonderful. I'm going to pass it back to Lindsay now. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. That's all that we have. Thank you for joining us today, and a special thanks to the panelists. Thank you also to the DOEE and the DSLBD for inviting us here today. And for anyone looking for additional information about the program, District Buying Power, you could visit the website at districtbuyingpower.com. Matt had mentioned earlier that you can submit your utility bills, and that could be done right through the District Buying Power website. You could, if you're curious to see if you are eligible, just go ahead and email or submit those utility bills right through the website, and we'll be able to reach out to you to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.